On October 7th, 1993, at 6 hours and 15 minutes in the morning, Michael and Jessica Riley pulled out of their driveway in suburban Pittsburgh, heading toward the mysterious Thornwood Castle in West Virginia. 72 hours later, they would disappear without a trace. 4 years later, they will be discovered in an underground laboratory, with modified bodies and unexplained surgical implants that an FBI expert will describe as technology beyond human comprehension. Michael Riley, a 32-year-old professor of architecture at the University of Pittsburgh, is used to systematizing information. His desk has always been pedantic. Catalog cards arranged alphabetically, Faber-Castell pencils sharpened to identical sharpness, color-coded folders. It was this trait that had allowed him to assemble in 6 months an impressive dossier on Thornwood Castle, a Gothic structure built by eccentric industrialist Edward Thorne in 1887, and abandoned after his mysterious disappearance in 1920. This could be the basis for a terrific monograph on the Gothic revival in late 19th century American architecture. Michael was telling his colleague on the Nokia phone on October 5th at 8:30 in the evening, the day before he left, arranging old photographs and maps of the castle on the table. His voice sounded enthusiastic, but with a subtle note of concern that only his close friend Professor Carlson noticed, but did not pay attention to it, something he would bitterly regret later. In the next room, Jessica, a 28-year-old National Geographic photographer, was methodically checking her equipment. A Canon EOS 1N camera, 3 Sigma lenses of various focal lengths, a moleskin notebook in a worn leather cover, and the Brunton compass her father had given her before her first expedition to the Amazon. Jessica's hands, with thin fingers and a distinctive callus on her right index finger, a mark from endless presses on the shutter release button, moved with the mechanical precision of clockwork. "We'll be back in 3 days, Mom, and I'll bring you some terrific pictures for your collection of mysterious places." These words, spoken by Jessica in a telephone conversation on October 6th at 14 hours and 23 minutes, were the last words Elizabeth Morris heard from her daughter. A tape recording of this conversation, made by the answering machine of an old Panasonic telephone, would later be analyzed by FBI experts trying to detect hints of fear or foreboding in Jessica's voice, but to no avail. The evening before their departure, the couple loaded their red '93 Jeep Cherokee with camping gear, a North Face Mountain 25 tent designed for extreme weather conditions, 2 Coleman sleeping bags with comfort temperatures down to -10 degrees, a 5-gallon jerry can of drinking water, canned and dry rations for 5 days, a first aid kit with antibiotics and snakebite antidotes common to the Appalachians, and 2 Maglite flashlights with spare Energizer batteries. According to Richard Riley, Michael's father, his son always prepared for the worst-case scenario, even going to the supermarket, a trait acquired after an incident in the Rocky Mountains when Michael spent 2 days in a blizzard with minimal supplies. Michael diligently plotted the route on a U.S. topographical survey map, marking with a red Sharpie felt-tip pen the best route through the wooded area to the castle, 23 miles from the nearest settlement. The margins of the map revealed odd notes in his neat handwriting. Anomalous magnetic readings? Check radiation. Strange acoustic effects, according to local reports. Strangely, the more I learn about this place, the more I feel as if it's calling to us, Jessica wrote in her journal the night before she left, adding a sketch of a silhouette of the castle tower against the full moon that investigators would later describe as disturbingly prophetic. The tape, found during a search of their home, would become the first clue to FBI agent David Morgan's theory of psychotronic influence, a hypothesis that his colleagues would greet with skeptical smiles, but which would gain ominous confirmation 4 years later. As they drove out of their driveway at 6:15 in the morning on October 7th, the couple waved goodbye to their neighbor Harold Wilkins, who was walking his Rottweiler dog named Brutus. A mundane gesture that was the last evidence of their existence in the familiar world. Wilkins would later recall that Jessica looked unusually pale, and Michael held his gaze for a split second, as if he wanted to say something, but changed his mind. The sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon, coloring the sky blood red, a natural phenomenon caused by the increased concentration of dust in the atmosphere, but in the context of subsequent events has acquired an ominous symbolism in media reports. A surveillance camera at the Shell gas station in Harpers Creek recorded their arrival at 18 hours and 12 minutes. The surviving footage shows Michael studying a map under a dim fluorescent lamp, and Jessica glancing anxiously at a dark Chrysler New Yorker sedan parked nearby. The station operator, Thomas Greer, recalled, "The woman bought 2 bottles of Evian water and asked if I had noticed anything strange around Thornwood Castle. I said the locals don't go there after sundown. She just smiled, as if I'd shared an amusing superstition." That was Jessica Riley's last captured smile. In 15 hours, their phones would stop answering. In 36 hours, their parents would contact the police. 63 days later, the search will officially end. 4 years from now, the truth will begin to unfold. A truth that will force the FBI leadership to create a special unit to investigate anomalous biotech incidents. On October 8, 1993, at 9 hours and 32 minutes, Elizabeth Morris dialed her daughter's number for the 20th time that morning. The receiver of the house phone, pressed to her ear to the point of pain, again delivered the mechanical voice of the answering machine. "You've reached Jessica and Michael. We're probably doing something interesting right now. Leave a message." Elizabeth machine noted how carefree her daughter's voice sounded as she recorded this message. The contrast with the icy fear that gripped her mother's heart was unbearable. "Jessie never misses our morning calls. Something's up." Those words, spoken in a trembling voice in a phone conversation with Richard Riley, set in motion a chain of events that would eventually become one of the most mysterious disappearances in West Virginia criminal history. By that evening, after multiple unsuccessful attempts to contact the couple, relatives contacted Mason County Police. The officer on duty, Patrick Donovan, registered a report but without enthusiasm. Adults often turn off their phones on vacation, wait 24 hours. That phrase in his report would later become the subject of a department investigation. "We found their Jeep Cherokee with license plate WV238AKL, 2 miles from Thornwood Castle. Engine cold, keys in ignition. No signs of struggle." Mason County Sheriff Robert Decker reported in an initial missing persons report dated October 9th, time-stamped at 16 hours and 45 minutes. The vehicle's location, a shaded forest road with dense undergrowth and low-hanging sycamore branches, made for an ominous scene. Dry leaves covered the hood of the car in a thin layer, indicating that the vehicle had been parked there for at least a day. Sheriff Decker, a 25-year law enforcement veteran, stood outside the red Jeep as a sheriff's department photographer took pictures for documentation. A map with a marked route, 2 empty Evian water bottles, and a Grateful Dead cassette tape in the record player were found in the passenger compartment. The stereo is on, battery dead. This entry from his moleskin notebook, identical to Jessica's, will be admitted into evidence. The next day, the 10th of October, the first search operation was organized. A search team with canine dogs found Michael's khaki backpack in the bushes near the ruined castle gates. Its contents, a notebook with architectural notes, a Swiss Army penknife, a Sony portable recorder, and a pack of Altoids mints, scattered as if someone was hurriedly searching for something specific. The last entry in the notebook, in Michael's confident handwriting. Strange echo in the east wing. Possibly a hidden room? Check for acoustic anomalies. The recorder contained 16 minutes of footage of Michael describing the architectural features of the castle. The recording broke off at the half word. Jess, look at this masonry wall. It's obviously newer than the rest. Maybe there was... This was followed by a strange metallic sound and silence. The tracks break off at the entrance to the castle, as if they've just vanished into thin air. Jack Harrison, a search and rescue team leader with 20 years of experience, remarked puzzled in an interview with the local newspaper, Harper's Creek Daily, dated October 13th. The dogs, trained to search for human scent, were showing unexplained restlessness at the main entrance to the castle, whining, refusing to go inside, circling in place. In 30 years of working with search dogs, I've never seen this kind of behavior, admitted film scientist Michael Render in a private conversation with Sheriff Decker. Inside Thornwood Castle, the team found signs of recent human occupancy. Shoe prints in the dust. The butt of a Marlboro cigarette. Jessica didn't smoke and Michael preferred Camel. And a strange symbol drawn in chalk on the floor of the center hall. It's not vandal graffiti or secret homeless signs. The symbol resembles a medical or scientific pictogram, but does not match any of the signs I know of, Detective Alan Price noted in his report. The following weeks brought only frustration to the search teams. A thorough survey of the area within a 5-mile radius of the castle yielded no results. Volunteers from local residents, skeptical of the old building, participated in the search reluctantly. People here know the place isn't good. Even my grandfather used to say that the castle was brought from Europe in parts, and together with the stones they brought something out of this world, were the words of old-timer Harry Simmons, recorded on a tape recorder by a Harper's Creek Daily reporter, which did not make it into the print version of the article. After 63 days of an intensive search involving helicopters, thermal imaging cameras, and over 200 volunteers, Sheriff Decker announced at a press conference on December 15th. The official version is an accidental fall into one of the many sinkholes or abandoned mines. The bodies will probably never be found due to the complex underground hydrologic system of the region. The conference room at the county police department was packed. Locals, reporters, and grief-stricken relatives listened as the official investigation closed. Sheriff Decker's face, normally unruffled, betrayed an inner tension. Later, in a private conversation with a friend, he admits, "I've been a police officer for 30 years, but this is the first time I feel like the answer is right in front of my nose, but I can't see it. My son was too careful for such a stupid mistake. They couldn't have just fallen into the hole. Something or someone took them." These words of Richard Riley, Michael's father, recorded on a tape recorder by a Charleston Gazette reporter on December 18th at 13 hours and 5 minutes, were the beginning of a private investigation that the families of the missing would be conducting for years. Michael and Jessica's families joined forces, hiring private investigator Lawrence Kane, a former FBI agent with experience in the missing persons unit. 90% of disappearances are the fault of other people, not natural phenomena. This phrase of his would become the unofficial motto of the private investigation. Going back to the beginning of the chain of events, investigators noticed a surveillance video of a Shell gas station in Harper's Creek taken on October 7th at 18 hours and 12 minutes. It shows Jessica saying something excitedly to Michael, pointing to a map, and then casting a wary eye toward a dark 90s Chrysler sedan with tinted windows parked nearby, a detail the police had overlooked, but which would later prove crucial to the investigation. Detective Kane, reviewing the tape for the 20th time, noticed a detail that had escaped police attention. A reflection in the storefront window showed a man wearing a medical mask and dark glasses, watching the couple from behind a rack of automotive oils. No one wore masks in '93 without a good reason, he noted in his notebook. It was this lead, ignored by the official investigation, that would eventually lead to the shocking discovery in the cellars of Thornwood Castle. But that wouldn't happen until 4 long years later. The gray dawn of August 23, 1997, did not portend anything unusual for the group of speleologists who arrived at Thornwood Castle. The collapse of the eastern wall of the basement after heavy rains was considered a routine investigation for the West Virginia University research expedition. None of the 5 researchers had envisioned that day would forever change perceptions of the boundaries of the possible. At 15 hours and 45 minutes, speleologist Daniel Foster, a 37-year-old geology professor with decades of field research experience, and his team of 4, entered a previously unknown tunnel discovered after the partial collapse of the castle's eastern basement wall. The stones simply shifted, revealing a passageway that wasn't on any plan of the building, as if the castle itself had decided to reveal its secret. Foster later recounted in an interview for a special edition of Discovery Channel's Appalachian Mysteries, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. The oddity lay in the perfect geometry of the passage, too correct to be the result of a natural collapse. A narrow tunnel cut through the solid limestone rock and went down at a 30-degree angle. The walls had been worked with an unknown tool, leaving distinctive spiral grooves, a feature that geologists could not explain. Draeger oxygen sensors showed normal air composition, but all members of the expedition noted a strange metallic taste and a sensation of electrical tension in the air. In the narrow cave, at a depth of about 50 feet, by the light of Petzl headlamps, the explorers saw what they initially mistook for a modern installation: 2 horizontal cylinders made of a transparent material resembling plexiglass, but with an uncharacteristic bluish glow. My flashlight illuminated the contents of the first cylinder, and I screamed. Inside was a human body, a man, submerged in a yellowish liquid, with his eyes open. For a moment I thought he blinked. This testimony by Maria Hawk, Foster's assistant, recorded in the official FBI transcript, would later be stricken from the public version of the document. The sarcophagi, made of an unknown polymer material, were filled with a special preservation solution that, according to forensic scientist Dr. Elaine Raskin, preserved the tissues in a state resembling anabiosis, which is technologically impossible with the current state of science. In her August 27th report, Dr. Raskin noted, "The absence of characteristic signs of decomposition after a 4-year period is contrary to all known biochemical processes. Tissues retain elasticity, cellular structures are intact, and there is no autolysis." Speleologists immediately contacted the Mason County Police Department. Sheriff Robert Decker, who arrived on the scene at 17 hours and 32 minutes, immediately contacted the FBI regional office after examining the find. "This is well outside our jurisdiction," read his terse entry in the incident log. Identification from dental records and DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to Michael and Jessica Riley, who went missing 4 years ago, read an official FBI report dated September 2, 1997, marked for official use, that had reached the press through an informant in the Bureau. The families of the missing had received confirmation of the identification a day earlier, on September 1st, at 11 hours and 20 minutes. Special Agent David Morgan personally broke the news to them. The accompanying discoveries were even more shocking than the discovery of the bodies themselves. CT scans performed on a Siemens Somatom Plus machine at the FBI lab in Quantico revealed unexplained anomalies. The bodies bore the traces of surgical interventions of the highest level of complexity. In Michael's brain were implanted miniature electronic devices of unknown purpose, connected to the cerebellum and frontal lobes through microscopic conductors made of an alloy that does not correspond to any known metal. Jessica's skeletal structure was modified with the addition of titanium alloys that, according to one biomechanics expert, Dr. Richard Nolan, resembled an insect exoskeleton, but with biomechanical characteristics beyond those of modern prosthetics. In both victims, the spine was augmented with artificial segments containing microprocessors the size of a grain of rice. Histological analysis at the Center for Disease Control Laboratory revealed even more disturbing details. Tissues from both victims contained traces of an experimental drug called Compound Z27, developed as part of a secret military program to extend tissue life under extreme conditions. The program was officially terminated in 1989 due to ethical constraints and the technological impossibility of synthesizing the key component. We are dealing with a version of the drug that is dozens of times more effective than recent laboratory samples, said Dr. James Wilson, the former head of the program. Achieving these results would require a breakthrough in biochemistry comparable to going from a steam locomotive to a rocket engine. Electron microscopy revealed nanoscale devices in the tissue, which Dr. Alan Steinberg of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology described as technology that is at least 50 years ahead of current science. The devices, which are the size of a red blood cell, but much more complex in structure, showed signs of activity even after being removed from the bodies. The expert committee, which consisted of leading specialists in the fields of medicine, physics, microelectronics, and forensics, worked under conditions of maximum secrecy. The extent of modifications to the human body and the technology used suggest a non-human intelligence behind these experiments, or knowledge whose source is outside the boundaries of recognized science. This phrase from the preliminary conclusion of the expert committee was dropped from the final version of the report, but leaked to the press through the Washington Post's investigative journalism. On the walls of the cave, investigators found strange symbols carved with metal tools and covered with fluorescent paint, which, according to cryptographer Nancy Lee, represented a mathematically complex system similar to a programming language, but with elements that do not correspond to any known human coding system. The symbols were arranged in a specific order, forming a spiral sequence corresponding to the mathematical progression of the number phi. When we did a three-dimensional scan of the cave with the LiDAR system and overlaid the location of the symbols on the map, we got an accurate projection of the human brain with marked areas of activity. This fragment from the report of neurophysiologist Thomas Brown became the reason for its immediate removal from public access. The FBI press conference, held on September 10, 1997, was scant on details. The Federal Bureau of Investigation confirms the discovery of the bodies of Michael and Jessica Riley, missing since 1993. The circumstances of their deaths indicate a criminal nature. An investigation is underway. This standard wording did not reflect the magnitude of the discovery, nor its potential implications for understanding the limits of modern science. Meanwhile, in the closed laboratories of government agencies, scientists were trying to unravel the mystery of technologies that, in the words of theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, who visited the lab in strictest secrecy, either represent the greatest hoax of the century or signal a breakthrough in the understanding of the universe for which mankind is not yet ready. Drizzling rain drizzled down the windows of the FBI building in Quantico in the early morning hours of October 3, 1997. Bureau hotline operator Carol Jenkins, a 42-year-old employee with 18 years of experience, was finishing her night shift when the phone rang at 8 hours and 27 minutes. The voice on the other end of the line sounded tense, with a barely audible tremor. A psycholinguistic analysis would later classify it as extreme anxiety with signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. I know who is behind the Thornwood experiments. I worked with him until I realized what he was doing to people. These words, spoken by Eric Sanders, a former lab technician at Walter Reed Medical Center, set in motion an investigative mechanism that would, in 21 days, lead to the solving of one of the most gruesome crimes in modern forensics. The emergency reporting protocol went off immediately. 17 minutes after the call, Special Agents David Morgan and Sarah King arrived at Sanders' modest apartment in suburban Washington, D.C. Curtains tightly drawn, double locks on the door, unfinished coffee in a NASA logo mug, and unfolded newspaper clippings about the discovery at Thornwood Castle on the coffee table. Dr. Howard Mercer was a brilliant military surgeon, specializing in regenerative medicine, until he was quietly fired in 1989 for unethical experiments with tissue engineering on wounded soldiers without their consent. Sanders testified under questioning, nervously rubbing the frayed edge of his Patagonia sweater. His testimony was recorded on a Sony professional videotape, now stored in FBI archives under the number TV-1997-10-04-EM. The tape shows Sanders' hands involuntarily drawing symbols in the air, identical to those found on the walls of the Thornwood cave. He called it Project Metamorphosis, a radical transformation of human biology through integration with synthetic components. He said humanity was stuck in an evolutionary dead end, and an artificial leap was needed, Sanders told agents, stopping periodically to sip water from a plastic bottle of Evian, the same brand favored by Michael and Jessica Riley. An FBI stenographer recorded 87 pages of testimony detailing Mercer's research, methodology, and philosophies. He often spoke a phrase in Latin, homo novus emergit ex machina, the new man arises from the machine. These words were underlined in red pencil in the official transcript. Agents Morgan and King, veterans of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, immediately launched a background check. Within 48 hours, they determined that in the early 1901 year, Mercer had purchased, through a shell company, Heritage Preservation LLC, a 200-acre tract of land, including Thornwood Castle and surrounding grounds, for the sum of $2,300,000, from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The paper trail was professionally tangled through 5 jurisdictions, including Panama and Liechtenstein, recalled FBI financial analyst Robert Chen in his unpublished memoir. But one detail gave Mercer away. He used his mother's birthday as a password for bank correspondence, a little sentimental weakness that cost him his freedom. On October 5th, the investigation got a new breakthrough. Mercer's former assistant, David Lowe, who had worked with him from 1992 to 1994, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity from prosecution. His testimony, given on October 15th at 14 hours and 30 minutes, shed light on the infrastructure of the crimes. He set up an underground lab there, using old mining tunnels and natural caves, and on the surface, everything looked abandoned to deter the curious. Lowe told him, sitting in an interrogation room with distinctive gray walls and a one-way mirror. Thin fingers with ingrained chemical stains tapped out a nervous rhythm on the laminate countertop. A network of tunnels connected the main lab, operating room, biological materials storage, and living quarters. The ventilation system was disguised as natural sinkholes. Lowe provided critical technical details, electrical schematics, a plan of the underground facilities, and a schedule of equipment deliveries. Of particular value was information about a warehouse in an industrial area of Charleston that served as a logistics center for Mercer's lab. Surveillance of the warehouse recorded regular shipments of Siemens and General Electric medical equipment, Sigma Aldrich chemical reagents, and CryoLife cryogenic containers, all purchased through a network of front companies with fake medical licenses. Plainclothes agents disguised as workers in a neighboring warehouse recorded every movement at the facility. On October 17th, a special team of FBI technicians quietly penetrated the computer network of one of Mercer's suppliers. The operation, codenamed Digital Scalpel, revealed shocking details. Mercer was ordering components to create a bioreactor of his own design, capable of keeping isolated organs and tissues alive indefinitely. A technology he described in his classified scientific papers as the key to breaking the mortality barrier. The documentation contained blueprints for a device that resembled a hybrid of an artificial circulatory machine and a computer server, recalls technical analyst James Wong. Some components of the circuitry were beyond current technological capabilities. We still don't understand how he could make it work. On October 21st, the investigation team gained access to the surveillance archives of the Wells Fargo Bank in Harpers Creek for the period of 1,993 years. Painstaking analysis of hundreds of hours of footage yielded a crucial clue. When we matched credit card data with surveillance footage, it turned out that Mercer was in Harpers Creek on the same day as Riley and was using a dark Chrysler New Yorker sedan with fake license plates. Special Agent Morgan said at a briefing for the task force on October 23rd at 9:05. Video footage showed Mercer, wearing a surgical mask and Ray-Ban sunglasses, watching the couple from behind a rack at a Shell gas station. The very detail that local police initially missed. Agents determined Mercer's current location was a secluded home in the Blue Ridge Mountains, purchased in his late mother's name. On October 24th, a 24-hour surveillance was established. Observers equipped with Raytheon night vision devices took up positions on the surrounding heights. Late on the evening of October 24th, at 23 hours and 42 minutes, the FBI agents conducting surveillance noticed unusual activity as Mercer loaded several metal containers and a stainless steel briefcase, biologically labeled Biohazard Level 4, into the trunk of his Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Operations analyst Rachel Clark, who observed the activity through a FLIR thermal imager, noted, "The temperature of the containers was well below ambient, presumably minus 70 degrees Celsius, the standard for storing biological samples." This detail, combined with the apparent haste of Mercer's actions, served as the trigger for an immediate operation to apprehend him. Task Force Chief Michael Brennan activated the Red Surgery Protocol, the code name for an operation to capture a dangerous suspect with minimal risk of losing evidence. 6 extraction teams in full tactical gear took up their starting positions, awaiting the signal for action. The clock at the command post showed 0 hours and 15 minutes on October 25th. the final phase of the hunt for the man who had created technology that was, as one expert put it, either decades ahead of its time or from a source we can only guess at. It is a moonless night on October 25th, 1997. The silence of the Blue Ridge Mountains is broken only by the faint rustling of leaves and the distant cry of a night bird. At 3 hours and 15 minutes in the morning, on a synchronized Casio G-Shock watch, Agent Brian Caulfield starts Operation Phoenix, the culmination of a 4-week investigation that will forever change the American public's perception of the boundaries of science and morality. 3 FBI SWAT assault teams dressed in Kevlar tactical gear with ITT night vision devices simultaneously enter 3 key locations: Mercer's secluded mountain home, an industrial warehouse in Charleston, and an underground laboratory at Thornwood Castle. The operation is coordinated through Motorola's secure communications system from a central command post located in an unmarked Ford van. When we entered the main room of the lab, we saw something that forever changed my view of the boundaries of human morality and science. Assault Team Leader James Hawkins recalled in a private briefing for the FBI Director on November 8th at 14 hours and 20 minutes. The eyes of the 25-year Special Ops veteran, who had seen the Gulf War and drug cartel assaults, betrayed a deep psychological shock. In the center of the underground lab, illuminated by cold fluorescent light, was a huge GE Healthcare bioreactor, modified beyond recognition by Mercer. Inside the transparent tank, human organs with implanted mechanical components floated in a special yellowish liquid, connected by a network of thin tubes and electrical wires. On the white-tiled walls were brainwave scans with handwritten notes reading, "Consciousness Fusion, Day 237, and Memory Transfer, Successful." The room seemed alive, pulsing in time with the mechanisms at work. Sensors flickered, fluids circulated through tubes. The room temperature was maintained at exactly 36 6/10 degrees. Exactly human norm, noted the report of technician Mark Wilson, the first to enter the lab after the capture team. Howard Mercer himself was found at his home in the mountains, where he offered no resistance to arrest. "You are 4 years and 6 months too late. The experiment has already been completed and the results have been transmitted." This phrase, uttered by him at the time of his arrest, was recorded by the body camera of Agent Ray Donahue and subsequently analyzed many times by FBI experts trying to determine the addressee of the transmitted results. Seized during the search were 52 Dell and Toshiba laptops containing encrypted data, 17 IBM servers containing the results of experiments, over 3,000 pages of handwritten notes, and approximately 20 hours of Betacam SP tape footage showing procedures described by one agent as a scientific nightmare, read an official FBI report dated October 30th, much of which remains classified to this day at the request of the National Security Agency. The families of Michael and Jessica Riley received official notification of the suspect's capture on October 25th at 11 hours and 20 minutes. After 4 years of uncertainty, I wish I could feel relief, but instead I feel only cold horror at the thought of what my children have endured. These words of Elizabeth Morris, Jessica's mother, published in the New York Times of October 27th, reflected the feelings of the relatives of all the victims. The trial of Howard Mercer began on January 15, 1998, in Richmond Federal Court. The courtroom, with its oak benches and high windows that let in the cold winter light, was filled to capacity with journalists, relatives of the victims, and just curious citizens. eager to see a man who had overstepped the boundaries not only of the law, but also of human nature. Prosecutor Michael Donovan, known for his methodical nature and attention to detail, presented the court with irrefutable evidence of Mercer's involvement in the kidnapping and murder of at least 7 people between 1991 and 1997. We are dealing not just with a serial killer, but with a man who treated his victims as expendable material for experimentation, depriving them not only of life, but of their very humanity. This phrase from Donovan's guilty plea was quoted all over the evening news. However, the bodies of the 4 victims were never found, despite a thorough search of the entire area around Thornwood Castle by specialists from the FBI and anthropologists from the Smithsonian Institution. It is technologically possible to completely dissolve organic tissue without residual traces using certain chemical compounds, explained forensic expert Dr. Robert Lang at a February 1 court hearing, emphasizing the defendant's scientific background. Mercer's attorneys tried to build a defense on the thesis of the defendant's insanity, attracting the testimony of psychiatrists about grandiose delusions and delusions of grandeur. However, a thorough examination conducted by leading specialists of the Mayo Clinic recognized Mercer as fully sane and aware of the nature of his actions. "I am not a murderer. I am a visionary ahead of my time. Future generations will study my work as a breakthrough in human evolution," Mercer said in his last word before sentencing, delivered on March 11th at 16 hours and 35 minutes. CNN cameras captured a strange detail. As he spoke those words, he looked not at the judge, but at the ceiling of the courtroom, as if addressing someone unseen. Body language experts noted no signs of remorse and a continued confidence in the correctness of his actions. On March 12, 1998, Howard Mercer was sentenced to 7 life sentences without parole. However, most of the documents in his case were classified at the request of the Pentagon, and the laboratory at Thornwood Castle was completely dismantled by a special team of military specialists working in hazmat protective suits with self-contained breathing systems. Certain technological aspects of Mercer's research are of national security interest and cannot be publicly discussed. This dry wording from a Department of Defense press release dated March 20th set off a wave of conspiracy theories that has not subsided to this day. There are unexplained aspects to Mercer's experiments that make one wonder whether he was really working alone and whether he was really a performer or merely a tool in the hands of something we are not yet capable of fully understanding. This phrase from Special Agent Morgan's unpublished memoirs, written after his retirement in 2010, reflects the unsettling feeling that still envelops the case. Thornwood Castle was finally demolished in 2001 by federal order in 2000, and the area was declared a closed environmental zone with constant monitoring. However, locals claim that on moonless nights, a strange bluish glow sometimes appears over the former location of the castle, and electronic devices malfunction within a 1-mile radius of the site. Geophysical surveys conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey in the year 2003 did not reveal any anomalies that could explain the phenomena. The truth is that some scientific boundaries are not meant to be crossed. And sometimes what we take for non-human is actually the most human of all things, an unquenchable thirst for knowledge that in the wrong hands turns into a monstrosity that can change the very definition of what it means to be human, concludes the Emmy Award-winning documentary Shadows of Thornwood in 2005, leaving viewers with the unsettling feeling that the worst secrets of the case remain unsolved.